Welcome to Let the Quran Speak. I'm Safiyyah, your host. When a marriage breaks down, who has power, who has protection, and who gets hurt? We'll be looking at that now, especially in the context of divorce, marital conflict. We're reviewing this series by Abdul Halim Abu Shuqqah. This one is called The Muslim Family and the Woman's Position. And Dr. Shabir, welcome to Let the Quran Speak first.
Pleasure to be on.
Dr. Shabir, this discussion by Abu Shuqqah kind of shows the limitations of some of his way of thinking. So I thought maybe you could expound upon that a little bit more.
Yeah. So Abu Shuqqah was writing some 30 years ago in Egypt. So time and circumstance does have an effect on what we can produce, or it puts limitations on what's possible. But within those limitations, he made great strides in his 8-volume work. We've seen so far that he advanced the thinking about the rights of women that are allowable within the Islamic paradigm. And he highlighted things which were long neglected, things that are mentioned in the Quran, things which are mentioned in authentic narratives, or at least narratives which are widely considered to be authentic in the Muslim community, especially because they're found in the well-recognized collections of Bukhari and Muslim. Yet, when we come to this 7th volume that you're holding up, dealing with the problems that result in marriages and the dissolution of marriages, here we find that he is quite constrained by the tradition. He is still trying to make some advances and, argue for the rights of women. But still, this is within the time and place. So, for example, when he comes to deal with the problem of divorce, the old problem is that the divorce was conceived of both in the Quran and especially so in Islamic tradition as something that the man would pronounce. There's also a provision in the Quran for a woman to seek a divorce, but it's called a khula, or a separation. And in Islamic law, the way this plays out is that the woman would have to apply to a judge to get this accomplished. And perhaps this was for the protection of the woman in the past, because if a woman confronted her husband saying, I want to divorce you, perhaps that could lead to a violent confrontation and it wouldn't be in the woman's favor. But once she applies to the judge, here's an outside source of authority intervening in the marriage and protecting the women and ensuring her safe exit from a difficult situation. But for the man, it was thought in Islamic tradition that, he just simply has to say the word.
Yes.
He says, I divorce you, and the woman is divorced. And if he says it thrice, then it is a permanent divorce.
Yes.
Irrevocable. And this leads to complications if this couple would ever want to get back together again. And so in a moment's notice, the woman could find herself irrevocably divorced. What does Abu Shuqqah propose as a solution to this? Well, on the one hand, he's ambivalent about whether or not the 3 divorces pronounced at once would take such immediate effect.
Scholars are still ambivalent about it today, right?
Yes. But generally, scholars take one stance or another. There's a difference of opinion.
Okay.
But generally, a scholar would take one stance or the other. For example, Imam Ibn Taymiyyah famously, in the Middle Ages, opposed the general consensus, which held that if a man pronounces the 3 at once, then it only, the general consensus was that if a man pronounces the 3 at once, then it counts as 3.
Yes.
But Ibn Taymiyyah said, no, it only counts as once because it's only on one occasion. And what was envisioned in the Islamic law, especially as it is laid out in the Quran, is that a man may divorce his wife, but within the waiting period, he can unceremoniously take her back. If that happens twice, 3 times, then like 3 strikes, you're out. The 3rd time, he cannot take her back. Now, I said unceremoniously within the waiting period. If the waiting period is over and this couple wants to reconcile, well, they would have to enter into a new marriage contract with witnesses all over again. So this shows the gravity, like it's reached that stage.
Yes.
Within a short period of time of the waiting period, okay, minds could change and perhaps they regretted the decision, then if the waiting period is over and they didn't reconcile, it shows that there is a deep rift in the marriage. And okay, after some time of waiting it out and experiencing life anew and missing the other person, they decide to get married again. Okay, so they get married again. So each time the divorce is pronounced, this is counted as one historically. So given a long period of time, then it becomes, by the third time, this is irrevocable, because now it is really time for the couple to seek happiness elsewhere and not be, tied to the original situation. And sometimes women in particular may find themselves in difficult marriages, and they're not able to let go. And so the Islamic law, in a way, forces the situation by, making it very permanent. There still is a way to get back, but this is more complicated. Now, it can happen in case the woman marries again and her new husband either divorces her or dies, and now she's free to remarry her earlier husband or any other person. But you see, this is a long process.
Yes.
But now, in the time of Omar, the second caliph of Islam, it was noted that men were freely uttering the 3 divorces all at once. And in the time of the Prophet, peace be upon him, apparently, if somebody did that, it was still only counted as 1, because he did it 3, but on one occasion. And in the time of Abu Bakr, the first caliph, still counted as only 1. But Omar thought that, okay, they're just misusing this and pronouncing it all at once, so I'll hold them to their word, as a kind of a punishment to the men. Okay, so you pronounce the 3 divorces as if you're saying something light and easy. I'll take you to the word on that. So this became kind of permanent in Islamic law for many centuries, and then it almost was regarded as a consensus, and Ibn Taymiyyah famously objected to that. And some people nowadays are gravitate towards Ibn Taymiyyah's stance. I personally do. And some others continue to hold to what was established from the time of Omar, saying that if it's 3 at once, it's still 3.
Yes. So Abu Shuqqah is ambivalent on which position.
Yes, on the one hand, when he was describing what happened in the time of Omar, it would seem that he wants to say that this is the law now. It has become the law. But then he mentioned the case of Rukana, a man who had pronounced the divorce 3 times in the time of the Prophet, peace be upon him, 3 but on one occasion. The Prophet, peace be upon him, ordered him to take his wife back. So that means the 3 did not count as a permanent separation. So that means he went the way of Ibn Taymiyyah. So it's a little ambivalent. What was his final stance on that? But his reform is to say that the matter should be brought before the judge. And just as we said,
Abu Shuqqah is saying this.
Yes, Abu Shuqqah is saying that the matter should be brought before the judge. Just as the matter of the khula, the woman seeking the separation, would be brought to the judge, the man would seek to register his divorce with the judge, and then the judge would intervene to appoint 2 arbiters to look into the matter to see if a reconciliation can be forged, and if not, then of course the judge would record the divorce. But the catch is that, and this is where Abu Shuqqah is constrained by the prevailing paradigm, is that he allows for the possibility that the man would have uttered the divorce before requesting the judge to record it. So if the man has already pronounced the divorce, then the judge would have no recourse but to register this as one divorce, though the judge can still try to facilitate a reconciliation, but still historically will count as one divorce. And of course, the man does that 3 times. The 3rd time would be like a permanent separation. It'll be an absolute divorce, as you rightly said. So on the one hand, he's making advances, but on the other hand, he's constrained by the prevailing paradigm.
Okay, so Dr. Shabir, let's turn to verse 434, the very controversial verse, and see what Abu Shuqqah has to say about it.
Yeah, so this falls within the broader scope of what he's talking about when he discusses marital problems and the possible dissolution of a marriage. So Surah 4, verse 34 has been widely interpreted before Abu Shuqqah and even since to mean that if a man fears that his wife is disobedient, then he should take these steps, not all at once, but in stages. First, he will advise her, then he will separate his bed from hers, and third, that he would beat her. So this idea of hitting the woman obviously does not fit with our modern societies, and many Muslims struggle with this. Many Muslim women in particular, they write to ask me, how is it that God could allow such a thing to happen? Because for people in modern times, this is so taboo, it is so out of place. And so I've been personally forced to go back and look at the details of this, re-examine all of the books of tafsir, commentary on the Quran in Arabic, to see like what they say about this, how did they reach their conclusions, and whether that conclusion really has a basis in the text of the Quran, or people have read something into the text. But my interpretation is something else that I've explained in other segments of this show. So I don't want to spend the time going into that now. But for the moment, Abu Shuqqah takes the traditional view. Now, of course, among those who take the traditional view, most of the scholars try to give some caveats. They say, for example, Imam Shafi way back, more than 1,000 years ago, said that if one does not feel that this will be beneficial, he should not apply this measure. It's only to bring about a benefit. And the benefit that they foresaw was that maybe if the woman is, rebellious, then she might come to her senses by, just this, which they clarify to be, in their opinion, a light beating. It could be
most of them said it would be light with a miswak or something like that,
a toothbrush or with a handkerchief or something like this, only to register and to register the fact that this has become serious, and maybe to reawaken the person. They thought that it works this way, and Abu Shuqqah says, okay, well, this can work in the case of as a last resort. And there is also, in his time, apparently a prevailing sense among some Muslim reformists that the way to deal with this is to suggest that maybe some women by nature needs this. Some women need this kind of wake-up call. Different people need different things, they said. And so Abu Shuqqah takes this to be a last resort, and he quotes a famous saying that the last, cauterization is the last treatment, right? So, of course, not to cauterize the woman, but they're talking about medical cures, and you use some things as a last resort. It's not pleasant, but you do it. He makes all of these caveats and so on, and gives these cushions, but at the same time, he allows for this to be a possible, like the meaning of the verse.
And as you're speaking, I'm thinking, Dr. Shabir, that he spoke so progressively about women in public life, but then in private life, it seems like women are facing the same restrictions.
Yes, if a woman can be beaten at home, then obviously this changes the whole paradigm of how men and women interact and a woman's place in society. Imagine that the woman is a president of a country, but her husband might beat her at home. It changes the way in which the position of women in society and in families and so on are seen. At this point, the translator of Abu Shuqqah's book into English, Adil Salahi, goes to lengths in a footnote to give a different view and to say that, the verse does not mean that really you can hit. He says, okay, I'm translating it the way that Abu Shuqqah viewed it, but really where it says وَضْرِبُوهُنَّ, which is translated by many to mean and hit them, Adil Salahi explains that it means separate from them. I'm not convinced by Adil Salahi's view on this, and by other people who have mentioned a similar view. For example, Taha Jabir al-Alwani. But again, it's not the time for me to go into my own view on this. It's only to make the point that yes, Abu Shuqqah made a lot of advances in his thoughts about the rights of women. But the way in which the tradition has constrained Muslim thought on this particular question is particularly evident in the 7th volume of the series, where he's dealing with marital problems and the possible dissolution of marriage. In the same vein, we can also perhaps mention that Abu Shuqqah takes also a traditional view with regards to the permission for a Muslim man to have up to 4 wives. And here too, he tries to mellow that provision by giving some, pointing out to some problems that result from such marriages and so on. And again, he would like that application should be put before a judge who would then review the case to see if a man really can support 2 families and whether he will be able to be fair to all of them and so on. But still, he retains that traditional permission because it's so well entrenched in the Quran and in the Islamic traditions, without in a way dissuading Muslim men in general from acceding to that and showing the circumstances to which that originally applied and how the circumstances have changed in modern times, and even the psychology of people has changed in modern times to make that seem out of place in our modern societies. And of course, to point out some of the real problems that occur and that women face when this happens. I mean, he calls for patience for women. And women are naturally going to be affected by this. And then he cites a tradition from Al-Bazar, which I said, sometimes he goes to, although his main thrust was to rely on narratives from Bukhari and Muslim, but every once in a while he finds reason to take recourse in a hadith from some other extraneous source.
Yes.
So in this case, Al-Bazar, a narrative which says that a woman, if she's patient while her husband is marrying a second or a third, then, she will get this great reward in paradise. Right.
All right, we'll leave it at that. Thank you, Dr. Shabir.
You're welcome.
Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Muslim Media Hub, the new home of Let the Quran Speak.
Here we spread positivity and good. We help people experience the beauty of Islam and help them appreciate and understand Muslims.
This beautiful building we purchased at cost $2.3 million.
Yeah, we've already raised 1/3 of that money, and with your help, inshallah, we can pay off the rest.
So we're looking for people who can give $1,000 each. If you can be part of the select group, that's amazing.
Otherwise, just please give whatever you can. Every dollar counts.
It's our collective responsibility to share the message of Islam with our fellow human beings. Please help us continue this good work.
It's a sadaqah jariyah, something that will continue to be a benefit to the Muslim community long after Safiyyah and I are gone.
Please support our work at muslimmediahub.com.
Your support is zakat eligible and tax deductible.
May Allah bless you and your loved ones today and always. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.